Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Thornton. Welcome to my author website. I'd like to give you a little bit of information today about how you become a writer. So if you wouldn't mind, we're going to share the screen here just a second. There we go. Just want to let you know that I am a writer in Gainesville, Florida, and I teach writing classes at Santa Fe College for Community Ed. And I started the Writers Alliance with a friend of mine about 11 years ago. And we've really boomed in this area of Gainesville. It's a very artistic area, college town, that kind of thing. So let's get into it. So how do you become a writer? Well, you write. I have never been concerned about publishing. I've never been interested in marketing. I just write because I can't stop. I've sworn up and down a million times that I was going to quit writing. And then I'd find myself writing on napkins or receipts or parking tickets, whatever. Can't stop, won't stop. I want to tell you about my first rejection. I was 14 years old and I sent off a short story. This is true. Dear author, thank you for your submission to the New Yorker. We regret that we will have to reject it. From now on, please send your stories typed. And also, please send them with a full-sized envelope. We can't return your materials in a little lady's envelope. Well, of course, I only sent them a little lady's envelope. I didn't know that the envelope was to return the story. I thought it was to get the check. So anyway, another problem that I had when I was first starting to write was that I wasn't sure I was ever going to graduate from high school. I'd gone to this special high school, Nova, in Fort Lauderdale, and I was allowed to work at my own rate. So I was 2 years behind in math and 3 years ahead in English. And then we moved to Sarasota, Florida, and they honestly didn't know what to do with me. I'd already taken all the English classes. So they put me on the literary magazine and the newspaper. Now in high school, I finally showed my writing to a teacher and he told me I should do it for a living. I didn't know you could make a living as a writer. I thought about becoming a journalist, but I wasn't good at research. I'm a little bit ADHD. So I wasn't thrilled by the idea of becoming someone who always had to stick to the facts and check the facts and verify the facts. And anyway, I ended up dropping out of high school in my junior year and applying to college. There were no early entrance programs back then, so I don't know how I got into the University of Florida. I went to college to become a writer. I took writing classes with some amazing professors. One of the first classes I ever took as a high school dropout in college was a history class with a new professor named David Colburn. Dr. Colburn pushed me to write better and better. And even though I wasn't in a writing class, I learned so much from him about how to write well. He was this pale, serious Northerner who taught about race, ethnicity, and politics long before these subjects were even on the horizon. And when you read some of the titles of his book, you'll realize just how far ahead of his time he was. For instance, his 2007 book was called From Yellow Dog Democrats to Red State Republicans, Florida and Its Politics Since 1940. In the introduction to his book, he wrote, Florida reflected the new America, a nation of young and old, immigrant and native, rich and poor, all searching for a place in paradise that would afford them opportunity, freedom, and a better quality of life. Now you know why I love Florida. My email is Florida Wendy. Anyway, joining Dr. Colburn's class, I learned a lot about politics, race, and ethnicity in 20th century America. And years later, he became head of the Department of History. I went to work for him. Boy, I wish I'd stayed there and continued to work for him. If you want to see what it's like when you make stupid moves in your work life, check out my book called Sounding the Depths. Next, I took a class with Harry Crews. Harry was a local writer who wrote almost like Gothic books back before they'd ever been heard of before. Ironically, he was someone who applied to UF and didn't get accepted, and then he later became a professor there and one of their more famous professors. He taught me a lot about class. We had classes that were called Trial by Fire. You weren't supposed to tell anybody that you were the author whose book he was reading. He started reading mine, and unfortunately, I let everybody know whose book it was, because when he stopped reading, he said, "Kind of wears its heart on its sleeve, don't it?" And I was so horrified, I fell out of my chair, so everybody knew it was my work. Harry was one of the best teachers I ever had, and I stayed in touch with him over the years. He fought constantly to beat his addiction to alcohol and drugs. Ironically, years after I finished college, my friend Jody started dating Harry. She lived in a house across the street from me. And one night she called me in a panic to tell me that Harry was unconscious. He had drank all her bottled vanilla, a bottle of gin, and everything else in her cabinet that had alcohol in it. I called 911 and Harry ended up in rehab. Thank God he was eventually released and he lived to write many more books. His best to me is the story of his life, The Incredible Childhood Autobiography of a Place. Harry taught me to write honestly. So all this time I was writing stories, poems, essays, memoirs, etc., but I never submitted anything. I don't know why. I was just too afraid that my work wasn't good enough. I also took a class with Smith Kirkpatrick, who actually was one of Harry Cruz's mentors. Dr. Kirkpatrick encouraged me to submit my work. And I thought about it, but I never quite got around to it. But I have to admit, he was a fantastic instructor. His book is called Sun's Gold, and it's a novel about being on the ocean many years ago. Excellent book, if you ever get a chance to read it. So anyway, I finally finished college. And what is that quote by John Lennon? Oh yeah, life is what happens while you are busy making other plans. I got sick, very, very sick, and I didn't know if I would make it. When I survived chemo and radiation, I started submitting things right and left. I mean, after all, you might as well, you're still here, right? So I published a lot of stories and poetry in various journals and essays and all of that. It really meant a lot to me to be able to get all of those published. I was very excited about everything that was published. And I also, at the same time, wrote my first book, which was called Dear Oprah. Dear Oprah is the story of my experience with cancer. It's called Dear Oprah, How I Beat Cancer and Learned to Love Daytime TV, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle and all that jazz. About that time, a friend of mine said, "Why aren't you submitting your poetry and stuff?" And I explained to him that I didn't think it was good enough. He said, "Oh, honey, Emily Dickinson's already been done." So that was when I started submitting all my work to dozens of literary magazines, journals, books. They've all published my work, and I'm very honored about that. Now I'm in the process of submitting 2 books of poetry and 2 books of short stories to major literary contests. I'll let you know how that goes in the future. Then I also wrote a book about my love of music and how music got me through some really tough times. It's called Sounding the Depths, Memories with Music. And again, it's available on Amazon and Kindle. The book about music was really how the music was a background for the good times and the bad times in my life. And from that book, I learned a lot about using lyrics in a book, which is very difficult. I learned about fair use, which is a pain in the neck. And I learned about why I was a writer rather than a musician. Now, at the same time, I'd been writing all these mysteries, and I never did anything with them. But then I realized that all the mysteries were very similar to each other. They had different characters, but the main character was kind of, always a good guy, seriously damaged. So I made them all the same character, and I published it as a series. And 2 of my books are out now. Another one will be issued in 2021. This is Bear Trapped in a Trashy Hollywood Novel. This is about Bear living in Hollywood, California, and dealing with a crazy actress and her crazy family. And then I wrote Bear Trapped, Blowback, and I moved Bear to St. Augustine, which is my home away from home. Bear still lives in St. Augustine, but my next book will be set in my hometown of Gainesville, Florida. And I'm getting braver. I used my own photo for the cover of Bear Trapped Blowback. I've learned a lot about how to make a book look good and how to make it sound more punchy. Recently, I wrote my first screenplay. I even submitted it to a contest, and I'm currently working on a screenplay about my hero, Osceola, the Seminole Indian chief. I'm also working on a new novel, which I plan to submit to a real publisher. But when all is said and done, I'm so glad I didn't waste time waiting for my other books to be picked up by a publisher. There's a point where you just have to say, get the damn things done, get them out there. Emily Dickinson has been done. Thank you all very much for tuning in. And I hope you'll find a lot of things on our website that you will enjoy. See you soon.